This is Baltimore, America's 6th largest city, 12th largest metropolitan area. Home of more than 1.5 million people. Site of the nation's biggest steel rolling plant. Home for the House of McCormick, this country's biggest tea and spice house. America's second seaport. This is Baltimore.
The streets of Baltimore, infamous the world over for the dilapidation, the disrepair, the despair. Representing poverty on a massive scale in one of the wealthiest states in the wealthiest country in the world. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if we changed the tax policies that made it more profitable for landlords to keep their buildings like this than to fix them up like this?
Well, in some ways, incentives are already being used, and they're upside down. They encourage people to allow properties to deteriorate and become blighted. We reward people with lower taxes when they allow buildings to deteriorate. People who own vacant lots and boarded up buildings pay much less tax than their neighbors who are more responsible with well-kept up buildings, even though it costs the community about the same to build, operate, and maintain streets, sidewalks, sewers in front of both properties, regardless of whether they're developed or not.
But why is this change necessary? Was Baltimore's tax system flawed from the beginning?
The reality is that we're paying high property taxes because we've seen this continual drain of people.
Population of Baltimore in 1950, 1,337,000.
We're trying to maintain a city that was built for 1 million people with the tax base of about half of that.
Most Baltimoreans own their own homes, another good sign of economic stability.
Over the decades, as population has declined, vacant housing has become an epidemic in many Baltimore neighborhoods, particularly those affected by historic redlining.
The black butterfly is a relic of the redlining. Certain neighborhoods were designated for certain amounts of loans and based on the race of the inhabitants. And this was the 1930s. And in the 2020s, the patterns of disinvestment, depopulation, and blight still match those maps of redlining that the feds created in the 1930s.
Banks weren't willing to loan to black families, and today the consequences are clear. Properties in majority black neighborhoods are much more likely to be owned by speculators who siphon off community-created land values at the neighborhood's expense. They buy and sit on vacant properties in hopes that the surrounding area will gain value. They view these blighted properties as cheap lottery tickets.
For people who are very affluent, who don't depend on that current income for their daily life, they can afford to sit and wait. And historically, we know that land value over time tends to increase. So this is a gambling game that they play to make money off of other people's work.
Land is a tremendous reservoir of wealth in the United States. By taxing that wealth, you are helping to bring that value back to the community and to everybody who's contributing to it.
What our reform does is it encourages people to make their money in real estate by being productive. We reduce the tax on people who construct, improve, and maintain buildings. This provides housing that we desperately need. This provides jobs that we desperately need. And then we require those who let land sit idle. We make sure that they pay their fair share for the access to infrastructure that they're getting. When you tax land according to its potential, people use it to its potential, because otherwise it becomes very uneconomic to hold it.
Our upside-down property tax should be turned right side up. Instead of paying taxes on houses and buildings, property owners should pay taxes according to the community benefits that they receive, based on the value of their location. That way, with a tax shift, the sea of vacant lots and boarded-up buildings would start to be replaced by houses and apartments and businesses.
One of the biggest problems that doesn't get talked about enough is how high housing costs are and how unaffordable housing is for my generation. I think of this not just as a policy that promotes more development, but actually as an affordable housing policy as well.
Recently, much attention has been given to a proposal called Renew Baltimore, which would cut property taxes in half across the board. While appealing on first glance, the plan is short-sighted.
About 1% of the properties in Baltimore are assessed above $1 million, but those properties would see about 30% of the savings from Renew Baltimore's proposal. Compare that with homes that are assessed for under $100,000. Those homes would see only about 8% of the savings from Renew Baltimore. So this is massively skewed towards homes that are valued very highly, commercial and residential real estate that's valued incredibly highly.
And these flat tax cuts will do nothing to incentivize the building of houses and businesses on these empty lots. City services would be further crippled with less tax revenue.
As a candidate for city council, I have no doubt that one of the biggest issues that everyone has across my district and across the city is the lack of good city services. A solution which just cuts our revenues without, finding other good revenue sources is just going to slash into city services, which in Baltimore, nobody wants.
On the other hand, Baltimore Thrive's plan cuts taxes for the majority of residents and many businesses without diminishing revenues for essential public services. Baltimore Thrive recommends a tax shift to reduce taxes on productive residents and businesses while increasing taxes on parasitic speculators who are sucking the lifeblood out of Baltimore. The Baltimore Thrive tax shift is not an untried strategy. A universal tax abatement on buildings has been used in Harrisburg, Allentown, and is under consideration by Detroit.